Did you know that the father of the 12 tribes of Israel began his journey as a deceiver who stole his brother's blessing and had to be broken by God to become a true patriarch? Jacob, the son of Isaac and Rebekah, is a complex and fascinating figure, an archetype of the man who seeks divine destiny through human and carnal means. His life is a profound study of grace, consequence, and transformation. From his mother's womb, Jacob fought for his survival and prosperity, using deception and cunning to achieve his goals. But God had other plans for him. Jacob, whose name means supplanter, would need to learn the true essence of divine blessing, a lesson that could only be learned through suffering and total surrender. This is the tale of a man who, in seeking blessing through deceit, found himself face to face with the Lord and was transformed. Jacob holds the secret of how God can take a supplanter and turn him into Israel, a prince who prevails with God. His story is a testament to God's ability to transform even the hardest of hearts. Prepare to dive into the depths of the human soul and discover how a cheater can become an instrument of blessing and redemption. The true story of Jacob reveals the night when a deceiver fought the most important battle of his life and emerged victorious, yet forever marked. But to understand the depth of his transformation, we must first explore his origins and early deceptions. For to comprehend the magnitude of his redemption, we must know the seed of his cunning. Jacob's story begins with the struggle for a blessing, but ends with the revelation of a divine destiny. Let us then delve into the pages of the Bible and discover how the life of a deceiver can be transformed into an eternal lesson of faith, hope, and redemption. Jacob's story begins amid a family drama that transcends generations. The son of Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob was born clutching the heel of his twin brother, Esau, a symbolic foreshadowing of his future character. His name, Jacob, means supplanter or deceiver, a self-fulfilling prophecy that would shape his life in a profound and inexorable way. From birth, Jacob showed a penchant for cunning and manipulation, qualities that would manifest dramatically throughout his life. The family setting was dysfunctional, with Rebekah showing a clear preference for Jacob, while Isaac favored Esau. This tense dynamic created an environment conducive to betrayal and deception. One of the most striking episodes of his youth is described in Genesis 25 verses 29 to 30, where Jacob, cooking a stew, takes advantage of Esau's hunger as he returns tired from the field. Esau, desperate, says to Jacob, "Let me, I pray thee, eat of that same red pottage." This moment encapsulates Jacob's nature, always ready to exploit the weakness of others to achieve his own goals. The ensuing exchange of birthright was only the first step in a series of deceptions that would define his life. But this first deception would be only a rehearsal for a much greater coup, a deception that would fragment his family and force him to flee, seeking refuge in distant lands. The seed of Jacob's cunning was planted, and its consequences would be immense and transformative. The plot orchestrated by Rebekah and executed by Jacob in Genesis 27 is one of the most dramatic and revealing episodes in the life of this biblical patriarch. The plan was audacious and dangerous. Jacob, with the help of his mother, would disguise himself with goat skins to deceive the blind Isaac, who was about to bless Esau. The paternal blessing, symbol of birthright and inheritance, was a prize coveted by both brothers, but Jacob, driven by a mixture of cunning and a desire to fulfill the divine promise that had been given to him, decided to take for himself what did not rightfully belong to him. The execution of the plan was precise and calculated. Jacob, wrapped in goat skins to imitate the roughness of Esau's skin, approached Isaac, who, deceived by touch and smell, gave him the blessing reserved for his firstborn son. However, the consequences of this act were devastating. Upon discovering the fraud, Esau was seized with murderous rage, vowing to kill his brother. The threat was real and imminent, and Rebekah, fearing for Jacob's fate, sent him to Haran, where he would live in long exile. Jacob's flight marked the beginning of a period of isolation and self-discovery. The tragic irony of this deception is overwhelming. Jacob, who deceived using the skin of an animal, would be deceived in the darkness of his wedding night, reaping what he had sown. Tears and frustration would be his companions during this journey. This man, obsessed with the divine promise, was willing to achieve it by any means without depending on God. His cunning and manipulation led him to a crossroads where, for the first time, God would reveal himself to him in an unexpected way, initiating a process of refinement and transformation. His escape led him to a lonely place where silence and solitude would become his teachers, preparing him for a new phase of his life where he would learn the true essence of divine blessing. In Haran, Jacob found a master worthy of him, Laban, a man whose cunning equaled or even surpassed his own. Jacob's first great lesson came on the night of his wedding, when Laban, betraying his trust, exchanged Leah for Rachel, causing Jacob to experience the bitter taste of his own medicine. This act of deception not only humiliated Jacob, but also forced him to reflect on the consequences of his own actions. For the next 20 years, Jacob worked hard for Laban, raising cattle and using his tricks with striped rods to increase his flock. What he did not know was that his own strategies were being used within God's sovereign plan to enrich him. This period was crucial as it showed God's hand shaping Jacob through circumstances. Jacob reaped the bitter fruits of his own nature, experiencing the pain and frustration of being deceived while paradoxically being blessed materially. God was preparing him, using Jacob's own tricks against him, so that he could learn the true essence of divine blessing. But the peak of his spiritual transformation would not happen in prosperity, but in a lonely valley on the banks of a river, on the threshold of his greatest fear, the reunion with Esau. The great revelation was just beginning, and Jacob, now more mature and humble, was about to face the greatest challenge of his life, where the struggle with God and himself would transform him forever. The night at the ford of Jabbok, described in Genesis 32, is the climax of Jacob's spiritual transformation. Overcome with fear of facing Esau, Jacob finds himself in a lonely valley on the banks of the river, where he wrestles with a divine man until dawn. This confrontation is the theological turning point of his life, the moment when the supplanter, accustomed to winning through cunning, is forced to cling to God in total dependence. Jacob, who has always used deception and manipulation to achieve his goals, now finds himself without resources, without escape. He struggles with all his might, but not to defeat the divine man, but to obtain a blessing. His insistence, "I will not let you go unless you bless me," marks the transition from someone who sought blessing through lies to someone who begs for it in vulnerability. This struggle is not only physical, but spiritual. Jacob is finally facing the truth about himself. His strength does not come from his own abilities, but from dependence on God. The change of his name to Israel, he who wrestles with God, and the dislocation of his thigh are powerful symbols. He prevailed, but only through surrender. Jacob emerges marked, dependent on God, with a new spiritual identity. He becomes the shadow of every believer who needs to be broken in his self-sufficiency in order to receive a true spiritual identity. This struggle at the ford of Jabbok leads us to reflect. What do we need to wrestle with God in our own lives in order to receive a new identity? What areas of our lives need to be surrendered to Him? What deceit and deception do we need to abandon so that we can finally meet Him face to face and receive the blessing that only He can give? Jacob teaches us that true victory does not come from strength or cunning, but from total surrender to God. Jacob's life teaches us about the Jacobine nature, that we all have within us. The tendency to manipulate, control, and use cunning to ensure our own success and survival, even in spiritual matters. How often do we try to steal blessings with our own hands, impatiently, without waiting for God's timing and way? How many Esau's do we fear encountering as a consequence of our past actions? Jacob shows us that we need to be broken at the Jabbok, to have our self-sufficiency wounded so that God can give us a new heart and a new name. We need to learn that true strength does not come from our own strategies, but from total dependence on God. But here is the good news. The one Jacob wrestled with was the pre-incarnate Christ, willing to let himself be defeated in order to bless. He is here to teach us that, despite our failures and deceit, he is ready to transform us and give us a new identity. Jacob's struggle at the ford of Jabbok is an invitation for us to struggle too, not to win, but to depend, so that, like Jacob, we may be marked but blessed. And if we are broken, God will give us a new heart and a new name, transforming our Jacobine nature into a faith that prevails with him. This is the call for us, for the community, to seek our identity in God, not in our cunning. We have reached the end of this profound and transformative journey with Jacob, the deceiver who became a prince of God. The central lesson that this story brings us is clear. God specializes in transforming deceivers into princes. But this path necessarily involves surrender and the breaking of our own strength, symbolized by Jacob's dislocated hip. He teaches us that in order to prevail with God, we must set aside our human strategies and surrender completely to his will. Now, we invite you, the viewer, to become an active part of this transformation. Leave a comment here, writing Israel as a declaration that you want to prevail with God through dependence, not cunning. Also, share in the comments an area of your life where you feel the need to wrestle with God in prayer until you receive his blessing and a new perspective. The God of Jacob still transforms identities today. He is ready to take the broken pieces of our lives and transform them into something new and wonderful. May you all experience the transforming grace that changes the name of the deceiver to that of the prince. May God's love and blessing be upon you, strengthening you so that, like Jacob, you may emerge from the struggle with a new identity and new strength, blessed and transformed.